Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWAS NBA Wednesday. We got 11 games on the board. As far as Tuesday night, I went 1-1 in the NBA, so broke even, lost a little bit of vig. My loss was LaMelo Ball. Got ruled out. Tough. Bit by the injury report. It happens in the NBA. I did win my Bucks Warriors under. Things have been going very well for me recently. We got 11 games on the board, and I got a lot of bets. Let's get into it. I mean, is Cooper Rush worth 2.5 points? I would hope Quinn Ewers put up a decent stat line against Arizona State. If he didn't, we have a real problem.
You can say the same thing about Creighton. Okay, they had the one good game against Kansas at home.
When Toast talks about the kicking market, it's like some earth is flat shit. Andy, true or false, this is going to be a dog walking.
Dog walking. This is my dog walking of the day. I think it's going to be very ugly. Dog walking. I think this is going to be ugly.
Hey, get the sauce. Today's episode is brought to you by SeatGeek, and I want to give them a shout out here. If you're looking for a spot to get the best deal on tickets to some March Madness action, gotta go with SeatGeek here. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are over 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, and not just sports. They've got concerts on there, festivals. If you need tickets to an event, SeatGeek is the spot. I love SeatGeek. I'm a huge SeatGeek guy. I like how each ticket is rated on a 1 to 10 scale. You got to look for the green dots. The green dots means great deal. Red dots mean not as great of a deal. If you want $20 off tickets from SeatGeek, use the code KIRMS, K-I-R-M-S. That's $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek if you use the promo code KIRMS. And it doesn't have to be right now. You can click the link in the description and download the app, and you'll still get the $20 off later if you click this link right now. Promo code KIRMS. The #1 ticketing app, the best in the business. Why wait? Head on over to SeatGeek, promo code KIRMS. First up, we got Houston on the road in Orlando. These two teams just played last week. I had Orlando in the game. In fact, I think that was my only loss that night. I had a good night. And I think the Magic were my only loss, if I remember correctly. The final score was 97-84. Houston did this without Thompson or Van Vliet, so they didn't even have a primary ball handler. Still did not have problems with this Magic team. So as far as this matchup here, the first thing I wanted to look at was how this Rockets team plays against slow-paced teams, because we know Orlando's running a slow pace. They're 29th in pace on the season, 28th in the last 10 games. Didn't really find much here. I mean, the Rockets against the top 10 in pace, 14-7 against the spread, 13-8 to the over. Against the bottom 10 in pace, 11-8 against the spread, 10-8-1 to the over. So I didn't really find anything there. Next, I wanted to take a look and see if there were any patterns of Orlando against good defenses, because we got to give the Rockets that. Looks like they're back on the defensive side of the ball. They're 7th in defensive efficiency in the last 10 games. And it seems like Orlando struggles against good defenses. Against top 5 defenses this year, they're 1-4-1 against the spread. Against top 10 defenses, 7-11-1 against the spread. So Orlando against good defenses, not been profitable. Now, what else do we know about this Rockets team? They're elite on the offensive glass. They're probably the best offensive rebounding team in the NBA. They're first in offensive rebounding rate in the last 10 games, first on the full season. Orlando against good offensive rebounding teams. Against the top 5, 1-8 against the spread. Against the top 10, 8-17 against the spread. We're seeing a drastic difference here, because look at Orlando's numbers against teams that aren't a threat on the offensive glass. Against the bottom 5 in offensive rebounding rate, 9-7 against the spread. Against the bottom 10, 14-11-1 against the spread. So this Magic team struggles against good defenses. They struggle against good offensive rebounding teams. It's exactly what the Rockets are. Also, staying on the topic of the Rockets offensive rebounding, there's also a drastic difference in the totals. This is kind of crazy. So the Magic against top offensive rebounding teams, so teams like the Rockets, heavy to the under. Against the top 10, they're 6-19 to the under, 2-7 to the under against the top 5. Against the bottom 10, bottom 5, so teams that aren't a threat on the offensive glass, heavy to the over. 12-4 to the over against the bottom 5, 14-12 to the over against the bottom 10. And when we're talking about the Orlando Magic offense, I mean, not only are they bad, but this is an offense that also runs a lot of pick and rolls. They're 3rd in the NBA in pick and roll frequency. Houston is 6th in the NBA in defensive efficiency against the pick and roll, and they've played very well against pick and roll offenses. The Rockets this year against pick and roll offenses, against the top 10 in frequency, 16-7 against the spread, 8-2 against the spread against the top 5 in frequency, against the bottom 10 in frequency, 13-14-1 against the spread, 7-8 8 against the spread against the bottom 5 frequency. So the Rockets much better against teams that run the pick and roll. I have even more bad news for the Magic offense, and I know this is getting kind of repetitive, but check it out. Houston's defense is really good against teams that don't have a three-point presence. As you know, Orlando's an awful three-point shooting team. They were awful three-point shooting team last year as well. Houston versus three-point shooting against the bottom 5 in frequency, 4-3 against the spread. Against the bottom 10 in frequency, 14-7-1 against the spread. So the Rockets are more profitable against teams that don't shoot the three-point shot. Now, as far as the Orlando defense goes, they can protect the paint. And this is what I was looking at last time when I bet Orlando. They're fifth in defensive efficiency in the paint in the last 10 games. That should come in handy against Houston, an offense that likes to attack the interior. Here's the problem with that. Orlando is not profitable against teams that attack the interior. You back this Magic defense against perimeter shooting teams, not teams that attack the paint like the Rockets. Orlando against the top 5 in paint frequency, 3-8 against the spread, 2-9 to the under. Against the top 10 in paint frequency, 8-15 against the spread, 5-18 to the under. So against teams that attack the paint, fade the Magic, take the under. Check this out. Look at Orlando against teams that don't attack the paint. Against the bottom 5 in paint frequency, 7-3 against the spread, 8-2 to the over. Bottom 10 in paint frequency, 13-10 against the spread, 13-10 to the over. So against teams that attack the paint, fade the Magic, take the under. Against teams that don't attack the paint, take the Magic, take the over. Injuries on the Rockets side, still no Thompson. He's scheduled to come back next week, though, so we'll see. Reed Shepherd's been ruled out as well. On the Orlando side, Cole Anthony is on the injury report. He's listed as questionable. As far as betting this game, I like Houston. I got some Houston -2. I got some Houston -2.5. I personally have this game at about 4.5. So yeah, I'm on the Rockets here. Next game, we got Dallas on the road in Indiana here. These teams have played once, but it's irrelevant. The game was back on November 4th, so just a few days into the season. The Pacers won the game 134-127, but that Mavericks team is completely different than this Mavericks team we're seeing today. So pretty much irrelevant there. As far as how these two teams are playing right now, I mean, it's not even close. Not that the Pacers have been amazing, but the Mavericks are one of the worst teams in the NBA right now. One of the worst offenses in the NBA. They've even played some bad defenses recently, and their offensive numbers still don't look all that good. If you take a look at some of Dallas' recent games, I mean, you got the Suns in there, the Grizzlies, the Spurs twice, the Sixers, some truly terrible defenses. I mean, Indiana's defense isn't anything special, but it's definitely a big step up in competition from those teams. Here's the problem with that. Indiana has not been profitable against bad offenses. The Mavericks are definitely a bad offense right now. Pacers haven't been profitable against bad offenses. Against the bottom 5 offenses this year, 4-7-1 against the spread, 4-8 to the under. Against bottom 10 offenses, 9-16-1 against the spread, 11-14-1 to the under. So against bad offenses, you fade the Pacers, take the under. So where are we in terms of betting this game? Well, I have the Pacers at -13. So why haven't I smashed a Pacers -8? Well, this is the first leg of a back-to-back for Indiana. They have the Nets on deck, which is a much more important game. It's an Eastern Conference game, and the entire starting lineup is listed as questionable. Halliburton, Nesmith, Siakam, Miles Turner. So how can we place a bet on the Pacers? I would imagine at least a couple of these pieces are going to sit with the Eastern Conference game on deck. And then on the Dallas side, obviously you know that roster is currently a mess. So I guess Pacers are past, but until we know who's going to be playing for Indiana, I don't see how we could place a bet on this game. Detroit is on the road in Miami. These teams have played 3 times this year. The Heat beat Detroit back on October 28th, but they didn't cover the number. Since then, the Pistons have beat the Heat twice. So the Pistons are 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against the spread against this Miami team so far this year. Now, in the last 10 games, are we starting to see the Pistons cool down a bit? I mean, they had won 8 in a row, but in the last 10, they're 5-4-1 against the spread. I think they're 5-5 straight up as well. So they've been pretty mediocre in the last 10 games. In terms of efficiency, they're 9th offensively, 5th defensively, 18th in strength of schedule. The Heat are 17th, 8th, and 12th. So pretty close in terms of efficiency between these two teams. Now, they are running into a Miami Heat defense that seems to be trending in the right direction. In the last 10 games, they're 8th in defensive efficiency, like I said, 1st in the last 5 games. And Detroit, as good of a season as they're having, they've struggled against good defenses this year. Against top 10 defenses, they're 9-9-3 against the spread, 5-16 straight up Look at their numbers against bottom 10 defenses. They're 18-5 straight up. So against top 10 defenses, they're 5-16. Against bottom 10 defenses, they're 18-5 and 16-7 against the spread. So betting the Pistons against bad defenses, insanely profitable. Betting the Pistons against good defenses, not so much. Good news for Detroit, though. Although they've struggled with good defenses, what else do we know about Miami? Slow pace. And the Pistons have been profitable against slow-paced teams. Against the top 10 in pace, they're 10-15-1 against the spread, 10-16 straight up. Against the bottom 10 in pace, 18-10 against the spread, 17-11 straight up. So the Pistons have been much better against slow-paced teams. And the fact that the Pistons like to get out and run in transition is another angle that points to Detroit here. Miami Heat versus transition against the top 10 in transition frequency, 9-16 against the spread, 17-8 to the over. So against teams that like to get out and run, you fade the Heat and take the over. Against teams that don't like to get out and run, bottom 10 in transition frequency, 11-13 against the spread, 7-17 to the under. So when it comes to the Heat, against teams that like to get out and run, you bet the over. Against teams that don't like to get out and run, you take the under. And weirdly enough, on the Detroit side of things, against teams that don't like to get out and run in transition, like Miami, they never run the fast break. It also points towards a Pistons bet and an over. Detroit against the bottom 10 in transition frequency, 15-11-1 against the spread, 15-12 to the over. And check this out, I have even more numbers that point towards a Pistons bet and an over here. So we know this Pistons offense has been attacking the paint a lot. They've been very good at it. I mean, they've been top 5 in terms of frequency, top 5 in terms of efficiency. So they're coming for the basket. Not many teams can stop them right now. Miami's defensive numbers down there don't look nearly as impressive as we're used to seeing, and they've really struggled this season against teams that attack the paint a lot and teams that are efficient scoring down low. Both describe the Pistons. It also points towards an over. Check it out. Miami against top 5 in paint frequency, so teams that attack the paint a lot, 3-9 against the spread, 8-4 to the over. Against the top 10, 7-14 against the spread, 14-7 to the over. Now in terms of efficiency, against the top 5, 5-8 against the spread, 11-2 to the over. Top 10 in efficiency, 7-17-1 against the spread, 15-10 to the over. So the fact that Detroit's having so much success scoring down low, even more trends that point towards a Pistons bet and an over bet. And another thing that's true about this Pistons offense is they attack the paint a lot, like we just said. They don't shoot a lot of threes. Now, a lot of these are going to be the same types of games. Obviously, teams that attack the paint a lot don't shoot many threes, but check this out. Miami against teams that don't shoot a lot of threes, against the bottom 5 3-point frequency, 11-2 to the over. Against the bottom 10, 18-5 to the over. So, I mean, there's a lot on this side of the ball pointing towards a Pistons bet and an over bet. Now, as far as the Heat offense goes, it's going to be tough sledding. Miami struggled on the offensive side of the ball, and Detroit's defense is a tough matchup. They're definitely playing well. They might have some success out of the pick and roll, though. That's something Miami does, and that is something that's given the Pistons defense problems this year. Injuries on the Pistons side, same as it has been. No Jaden Ivey. Other than that, Pistons should be good to go. On the Miami side, we got Andrew Wiggins on the report. He's listed as questionable. Same goes for Alec Burks. Still no Jovic. He is still out for the Heat. As far as betting this game, as you probably guessed by everything I just shared, I like the over. I have this one all the way up at 224, so I'm way off market, which is probably a bad sign. But I do like the over. As far as the side, I mean, at 4.5, 5, I guess small lean towards the Heat, but nah, I like the over in this one. Next, Pelicans are on the road in Minnesota. These teams played once back in January. Timberwolves got them 104-97. As far as how they're playing recently, it's not even close. Pelicans 3-7 against the spread in their last 10. Timberwolves 6-4 against the spread in their last 10. Now, when we're matching these two teams up on the court, right off the bat, I got something I like here for the Pelicans. As I'm sure you've probably heard me say a number of times this year, the Pelicans are a terrible defensive rebounding team. Arguably the worst defensive rebounding team in the NBA. They cannot keep their opponents off the offensive glass. So why is that something I like for the Pelicans? Well, Minnesota has zero offensive rebounding presence at all. And check this out. The Pelicans have been profitable in these types of matchups. New Orleans against the top 10 in offensive rebounding rate. They're 6-21. Against the spread. So when the Pellies play a team that can grab offensive rebounds, blind fade. But as we said, Minnesota doesn't grab offensive rebounds, and look at the Pellies against these type of teams. Against the bottom 10 offensive rebounding rate, 13-9 against the spread. So betting the Pelicans against teams that don't grab offensive rebounds, it's been profitable. And I have even more good news if you plan on betting the Pelicans here. What's another glaring weakness of this Pelicans team? What it has been all year? Defense in transition. They can't stop anybody when they get out and run in transition. Here's the thing. Minnesota doesn't get out and run in transition. They're 30th in transition frequency. So the two biggest weaknesses for this Pelicans team, defensive rebounding, defense in transition, Minnesota's not equipped to take advantage of either of these. Now, obviously, when we're talking about a Minnesota Timberwolves game, we need to take a look at the three-point shooting because that's been the identity of this Minnesota offense all year. I mean, this is top 3 in terms of three-point frequency. They're right up there with the Celtics, the Warriors. This is a three-point reliant offense. Now, at first glance, that looks like it's going to be a serious problem for the Pelicans defense. They've struggled against the three-point shot. They're a bottom 10 three-point defense. But weirdly enough, that's when New Orleans has been profitable this year. New Orleans against the top 10 teams in terms of three-point frequency, 11-11 against the spread. Against the bottom 10, 10-16-1 against the spread. So they've struggled more against teams that don't shoot the three-point shot and attack the paint more. Check this out. Against the top 10 teams in paint frequency, they're 6-18 against the spread. Against the bottom 10, 13-9. So even though that looks like a favorable matchup for Minnesota on paper, New Orleans has been profitable in those types of matchups. Now you might be thinking, all right, Kyle, looks like a decent matchup for the Pelicans defense, but how are they going to score points on the road in Minnesota here? Well, for starters, what does this Pelicans offense do? They attack the paint a lot at an extremely high rate. They're second in the NBA in paint frequency in the last 10 games. Minnesota has struggled against offenses that attack the paint this year. Against the top 10 teams in terms of paint frequency, they're 10-14 against the number, 11-13 to the under. Against the bottom 10 in paint frequency, 12-11-1 against the spread, 16-8 to the over. Injuries on the Pelicans side, we got no Brandon Boston. He's been ruled out. Other than that, New Orleans will be at full strength. Well, in terms of the active pieces, obviously there's no Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, Trey Murphy, they're all hurt. Pelicans are a mess, but in terms of the active pieces, it's just Brandon Boston. On the Minnesota side, we got nobody on the report. Timberwolves should be at full strength for this one. When it comes to betting this game, I love the matchup for New Orleans. I love it, but when I plug it in, even when I adjust the handicap towards the Pelicans for all the matchups I like, I still have this one at 12.5. So even though I would love to take New Orleans plus 13 here, I don't think I have the balls to do it. I do think it stays under the total as well. I think the total is way too high here. So I'll go Pelicans and under. As of right now, I don't have a bet. I'll let you know on the live show, or you can go check KyleKirms.com on the open bets page. But as of right now, I haven't placed a bet yet. Next, New York is on the road in San Antonio. These two teams have played this year. It was on Christmas Day. Knicks got the win at Madison Square Garden. It was 117-114. Spurs did get the cover. I believe the number was 5.5. So the Spurs covered the number. I mean, obviously, both those teams were in a different state on Christmas Day than they are now. Wembanyama and Jalen Brunson both played in that game. Obviously, neither are active right now. So as far as matching these two teams up right now, we're kind of in a tough spot because we're trying to get a grasp of what these two teams are with the current rotation. I mean, the Spurs are first in offensive efficiency in the last 10 games and 30th in defensive efficiency. So in the last 10 games, the Spurs have been the best offense in the NBA and the worst defense in the NBA. Meanwhile, New York, Brunson goes down and all of a sudden they're playing elite defense. They're second in defensive efficiency, but we're talking about such a small sample size here. I don't know. I mean, are the Knicks one of the best defenses in the NBA? And are the Spurs one of the best offenses in the NBA? Really tough to say. And a couple aspects of this game that I thought we could hang our hat on. Knicks against bad defenses, right? The Knicks have really struggled against good defenses this year. They're 8-3 against the spread, 10-1 straight up against the bottom 5 defenses. Spurs are literally 30th in defensive efficiency in the last 10. But the thing is, most of those data points include Jalen Brunson. The Knicks are a different team right now without Jalen Brunson. They're more of a defensive team. So I feel like there's way too many moving parts in this one to place a bet. We also need to mention that the Knicks immediately fly to Charlotte to play the Hornets the following day. So they're on the first leg of a back-to-back. Charlotte, an Eastern Conference game, would be the more important game in terms of playoff seeding. So I don't know. I mean, I personally would make this one 9.5. So I guess I'd lean Knicks at 8.5, but it's just going to be a pass. Philadelphia is on the road in Oklahoma City here. These two teams have played this year. It was back in mid-January. Thunder went on the road to Philadelphia, beat up on the Sixers 118-102. I mean, obviously, we're talking about one of the best teams in the NBA at home against one of the worst teams in the NBA right now. This one's crazy because Oklahoma City's resting a bunch of pieces. Looks like SGA's been ruled out. Lou Dort Jalen Williams has been ruled out. So, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's going to be a rest day for Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma City's second unit can still blow the Sixers out, especially at home. But I'm not very interested in this one. Next, Washington's on the road in Utah. These two teams just played. It was a couple weeks ago in D.C. Wizards got the win, but the Jazz did cover the number. It was a high-scoring game. Final score was 125-122. Right off the bat, we know we're talking about the Utah Jazz against a bad offense, and that's been very profitable for the Jazz so far this year. On the full season, Washington is actually dead last, 30th in offensive efficiency, and it hasn't gotten much better at all. In the last 10 games, they're 27th in offensive efficiency and 30th in strength of schedule in that span. So even playing a ridiculously easy schedule, the Wizards still can't consistently score points. And like I said, Utah's been very profitable against bad offenses. On the season against top 10 offenses, they're 12-14 against the spread. Against bottom 10 offenses, they're 14-4 against the spread. So nice start to the handicap for Utah here, but it actually gets better than that. Check this out. Utah, as I'm sure you know, not a team known for its defense. This is not a good defensive team. They haven't been in multiple years, but they weirdly have great defensive numbers against the pick and roll this year. 11th in defensive efficiency against the pick and roll, 2nd in points per game allowed via the pick and roll. So weirdly, Utah can defend the pick and roll, which happens to be a huge part of the Wizards offense. And check this out. Utah, weirdly profitable against offenses that run the pick and roll. Against the top 5 offenses in pick and roll frequency, the Jazz are 8-0. 8-0 against the spread. Against the top 10, 15-4 against the spread. Meanwhile, against offenses that don't run the pick and roll, 4-11 against the spread against the bottom 5 in pick and roll frequency, 9-19 against the spread against the bottom 10. So a weird angle there for the Utah defense against a Wizards offense that runs the pick and roll. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend the Wizards won't have opportunities to score points. Of course they will. It's the Jazz. The Jazz defense is not good. Washington takes a lot of three-point shots. Utah allows a lot of three-point attempts. They collapse. You can get those three-point shots off against the Jazz. I will say, though, Utah's been secretly improving in that department. In the last 10 games, they're 8th in defensive efficiency against the three-point shot. So, look, I kind of like the matchup for the Jazz defense, as crazy as that sounds. Now, on the other side of the court, the Wizards defense actually has solid efficiency numbers in the paint. They're 3rd in defensive efficiency in the paint the last 10 games. We got to keep in mind they've played a super easy schedule. But look at the frequency numbers. 29th. Washington really struggling to keep their opponents out of the paint. And again, that's exactly the type of matchup Utah's been very profitable in this year. Against the bottom 5 defenses in terms of paint frequency, they're 7-1 against the spread. Against the bottom 10, 14-6. Against the spread. So this is a great matchup for Utah across the board. This line opened up 2.5. I have it at 4. So I would lean towards the Jazz here. I haven't bet it, but kind of talking myself into it here. Give me Utah, -2.5 in this one. Next game. Got an update in this one. So after I recorded that, we got some injury updates here. So Chris Middleton's out. Marcus Smart is out. Jordan Poole is listed as doubtful. And Keyshawn George is on the injury report as well, listed as questionable for Washington. So the Wizards got hammered by the injury report pretty much right after I recorded that. On the Utah side, we got some updates as well. No John Collins, no Walker Kessler, no KJ Martin. Some injuries on the Utah side as well. I ended up betting it. I took the Jazz -2.5. Then when Walker Kessler was ruled out, it dropped down to 1.5, and I grabbed that. So I actually have 2 bets on the Jazz here. Utah -2.5 and Utah -1.5 next. Cleveland on the road in Sacramento. These teams have not played this year. As far as right now, you don't need me to tell you this, but Cleveland's been playing much better basketball than Sacramento. In the last 10 games, the Cavs are 5-5 against the spread. The Kings are 7-3. So the Kings actually have been more profitable to bet on. But I mean, look at the efficiency numbers here. Cavs are 7th in offensive efficiency, 3rd in defensive efficiency. Kings are 14th and 23rd. So the Cavs have played much better than the Kings. Strength of schedule also goes to the Cavs. The Kings are 29th in strength of schedule in the last 10 games. Now, Cleveland is on a back-to-back here. They just played a game in LA against the Clippers. On the season, Cleveland is 11-2 straight up on 0 days rest, so they've won the games. Just 7-6 against the number, though, so I haven't been all that profitable, but they haven't been bad on 0 days rest. In terms of the rebounding and turnover battle, it's actually pretty close here between these two teams. Rebounding last 10 games, the Cavs are 14th on the offensive side, 10th on the defensive side. Kings are 16th and 2nd. So the Kings have actually been a better rebounding team than the Cavs, and they have been for most of the year, honestly. Kings, one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the NBA this year. Turnover battle, again, you can see on the graphic, it's pretty close here. Both of these teams slightly above average in the turnover department on both sides of the floor. It's tough to find patterns with this Cavs team because they really have been profitable against pretty much every type of team this year. Something I found interesting, though, we know Cleveland's going to shoot a lot of threes, right? On the season, they're second in three-point frequency. In the last 10 games, they're fourth in three-point frequency. Shots haven't been falling for the Cavs as of late. They're actually 29th in three-point percentage in their last 5. But look at the Kings defense. Look at the bottom right of this graphic here. In the last 10 games, the Kings are third in defensive frequency on the three-point line, meaning they're putting a ton of pressure on the perimeter. They are not letting their opponents get three-point shots off. Now, when their opponents get those shots off, they're making them at a high clip. They're 30th in defensive efficiency. But if they're going to put a ton of pressure on Cleveland and only give them the three-point shots that get kicked out, could be effective. I mean, Cleveland 12-9 against the spread against the top 10 defenses in terms of three-point frequency, 15-8-1 against the spread against the bottom 10. I mean, I guess that's something. I mean, like I said, it's really tough to find anything here. We know Cleveland's the significantly better team, but we also know it's a tough spot coming off of LA against the Clippers. I'm just going to skip this one for now. Obviously, we won't have an injury report for Cleveland yet. They're on a back-to-back. If everyone plays, I have this at about Cleveland -4, but we'll talk about this one on the live show next. Memphis is on the road in Portland. These teams have played twice, and the Grizzlies beat the shit out of Portland both times. 134-89 and 123-98. These games are kind of irrelevant, though. Both were in November. We know Portland right now is playing much better basketball than they were earlier in the season. I mean, you rewind back to October, November, they were one of the worst teams in the NBA. Certainly not the case right now. In fact, in the last 10 games, Portland is a top 10 defense. They're 10th in defensive efficiency, and that could be a problem because Memphis has struggled against good defenses this entire year. The Grizzlies on the season against top 10 defenses, 8-12-1 against the spread. Against bottom 10 defenses, 18-10 against the spread. So no question the Grizzlies have been much more profitable against bad defenses. Portland is most definitely not a bad defense right now, but it actually gets worse for Memphis because where specifically has Portland been dominant on the defensive side of the ball? Protecting the paint. In the last 10 games, they're 4th in the NBA in defensive efficiency in the paint. That's where Memphis is trying to take their shots from. On the season, nobody has taken more shots in the paint than the Memphis Grizzlies. They're 1st in frequency and they're 5th in paint frequency in the last 10 games. So not only has Portland been playing great defense and Memphis has struggled against good defenses all year, but specifically they've been locking down the paint. That's where Memphis takes most of their shots from. So it should be a good matchup for Portland defensively in this one. Now on the other side, when we're talking about the Grizzlies offense, we know Memphis is going to get out and run. They're 1st in the NBA in transition frequency, 1st in points per game in transition. So nobody gets out and runs as frequently as the Memphis Grizzlies. That could be a problem for Portland. Now, they're actually 3rd in the NBA in defensive efficiency in transition, so they've played pretty good defense efficiency-wise, but they allow a ton of fast breaks, 28th in transition frequency allowed. So Memphis should have plenty of opportunities to get out and run and score some points on Portland in that department. Now, on the other side, we got the Portland offense against the Memphis defense, and I think Portland's going to struggle to score in this one. And I know putting faith in the Grizzlies defense is freaking crazy, but now that Jaren Jackson Jr. is back in the rotation, I expect the Memphis defense to improve dramatically. I mean, remember, on the season, Memphis is 4th in the NBA in defensive efficiency in the paint. Now, Portland's been shooting a lot of threes recently. In the last 10 games, they're 6th in three-point frequency. They haven't really been hitting them, but that does play into the weakness of the Memphis defense, so there's something. Also, a lot of pick and rolls for Portland. They're 4th in pick and roll frequency, 4th in points per game out of the pick and roll. Memphis just 17th in defensive efficiency against the pick and roll, but again, having Jaren Jackson Jr. back should definitely help with that. We got some injury updates in this one. So Ja Morant's been ruled out. Same goes for Lamar Stevens. Santi Aldama's listed as questionable, but from what I'm reading, he's not going to play. On the Portland side, still no Ayton. Jabari Walker's been ruled out. Jeremy Grant listed as doubtful, and Kamara is on the report listed as questionable. As far as betting this game, I have it at about 5, so I guess maybe a slight lean towards Portland. Looks like you can get a Portland +6 right now, so a slight lean towards Portland, but I actually grabbed the under. I have this at about 234.5, 235. Memphis becomes a better defensive team without Ja Morant, maybe slows the pace down a little bit. We talked about how Portland's been playing good defense, so not a huge bet, but I have a small bet on the under at 238 in this one. Chicago's on the road in Phoenix to play the Suns. These two teams did play back in late February. The Suns won. Final score was 121-117, but the Bulls did get the cover. Weirdly, final score was 121-117. Still somehow stayed under the total in that one. Actually, both these teams have been covering the number recently. In their last 10 games, the Bulls are 8-2 against the spread. The Suns are 7-3. So if you've been betting the Bulls and the Suns recently, you are turning a profit. Right off the bat, the first thing I wanted to look at is I wanted to know how the Bulls have been against a team like the Suns. So slow-paced teams that don't play a lot of defense. And it's a good start here for Chicago. Against the top 10 in pace, they're 11-13 against the spread. Against the bottom 10 in pace, 16-9 against the spread. So they've been more profitable against slow-paced teams, which is solid. The Suns are 24th in pace in the last 10 games. Now against bad defenses, bottom 10 defenses, 11-8-1 against the spread versus 11-14 against the spread against top 10 defenses. So they've been more profitable against slow-paced teams. They've been more profitable against bad defenses. Solid start here for Chicago, although we do have to mention the Suns have been playing slightly better defense as of late. I'm not going to say the Suns are a good defense, but they are 20th in defensive efficiency in the last 10 games, 12th in the last 5. Now on the Phoenix side, I mean, the Suns have not been profitable against any type of team. Good defenses, bad defenses, fast teams, slow. Doesn't matter. The Suns have not been profitable. Something I did find that was interesting. So we know the Bulls like to run a fast pace, right? They like to get out and run in transition. Check this out. The Suns, against teams that run in transition a lot, so against the top 10 teams in transition frequency, which definitely describes the Chicago Bulls, they're second in the NBA. They get out and run in transition a lot. Against the top 10 teams in terms of transition frequency, 11-14 against the spread, 8-17 to the under. So when the Suns play these teams that run in transition, it tends to stay under the total versus the teams that don't run in transition, the bottom 10 in transition frequency, 6-10-1 against the spread. So again, not profitable against either, but 11-6 to the over. So against teams that run in transition, it's actually stayed under the total in these Suns games. As far as the Bulls offense against the Suns defense goes, it should be a good matchup for Chicago. I mean, if I was recording this a week ago, I would say, hey, this is a great matchup for the Bulls. They get out and run in transition. The Suns have struggled to defend in transition. They shoot a lot of threes. The Suns have been struggling to defend the three-point shot all season. That's what I would have said if I recorded this a week and a half ago. Suns are weirdly turning it up in the defensive department, specifically on the three-point line. They're actually third in defensive efficiency against a three-point shot. Now, that's in the last 5 games. It's a super small sample size, but I thought we should point out, at least give the Suns a little bit of credit. They have done a better job defensively against the three ball. Overall, I'd still say it's a good matchup for the Bulls offensively, but based on what's happened recently, I mean, also look at the Bulls shooting. 30th in three-point efficiency in the last 10 games. So they're still taking threes. They are not hitting them. In fact, they've actually been driving into the paint a little bit more frequently as of late, and that would actually play into the strength of the Suns' defense. Now, when we flip it over to the other side of the court and take a look at the matchup for the Suns, offense could be a problem here. As we know, the Suns take a ton of jump shots, plays into the strength of this Bulls defense. That's not new either. The Bulls have been playing solid defense against the three-point shot this entire year. They're actually second in the NBA on the full season in defensive efficiency against the three-point shot. That's going to be a problem because the Suns have been very reliant on knocking down those threes. They're first in three-point efficiency in the last 10 games. So this recent hot streak, the Suns are on 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. It's been on the back of the three-point shooting. Not sure if that's going to be there against this Bulls defense. As far as betting this game, I know it sounds crazy. I know everyone's going to hate it. I kind of like the under, 236.5. And I know it's how do you take an under in a Bulls-Suns game? The Suns defense, the Bulls defense, the pace. I get it, but both of these teams have been playing much better defense as of late. I like the matchup for both defenses. I have this one at around 230. And it's open at 236.5. So I'm actually right after I record this, I'm going to grab that under 236.5 next game. Nuggets are on the road in LA to play the Lakers. These teams have played 3 times this year. The Nuggets have taken 2. The Lakers have covered one of those losses, though. So the Lakers are 2-1 against the number against Denver so far this year. We've only seen one close game, and that was actually the most recent one on March 14th. The Lakers are resting almost everyone in that game. I believe the closing line was 15.5 or something, and the Lakers played them down. The Nuggets had to hit a 3 to win it at the end. I think it was tied. And I I don't remember exactly, but it was a close game. As far as how these two teams are playing recently, both are actually 6-4 in their last 10 games, but the Lakers have been much more profitable in the last 10 games. The Nuggets are 3-7 against the spread. The Lakers are 7-3 against the spread. So if you've been betting the Lakers, you're actually doing pretty well. Not so much with Denver. So as far as matching these two teams up on the court, the Lakers defense is finally coming back down to earth. They're no longer the most elite interior defense in the NBA. That was crazy while it lasted. Nuggets, obviously a team that like to attack the paint. They like to take shots on the interior. That being said, they haven't been all that efficient recently. In the last 10 games, the Nuggets are 15th in paint efficiency. So as long as Jackson Hayes is playing, honestly, the Lakers might be able to hold their own down low in this one. I mean, I think we can all admit we're pleasantly surprised by the defense the Lakers have played since the trade. We all thought this defense was going to be terrible, and it's not. I mean, it's not the elite defense they were right after the trade. They played an easy schedule, and it looked like they had the best defense in the NBA. They're not that good, but this is certainly not a terrible defensive team. They played good defense against the mid-range shot as well. It's really the three-point shot that's given the Lakers problems in the last handful of games, and honestly, that's not a factor here because the Nuggets don't shoot any threes. I really don't feel too strongly about this game right now. At the time of recording, you got Jamal Murray on the injury report. He's probable, but he is on there. Same goes for Jokic. Also, Christian Brown, also on the report, listed as probable. Lakers might be getting Nachimura back. He's listed as questionable. Same goes for Trey Jamison. Still no LeBron James. I personally have this one at Lakers +1, which is right where the sports books have it. I know the Lakers have another game the following day. This is the first leg of a back-to-back for the Lakers, but honestly, that doesn't move the needle for me here. They play Milwaukee the following day. This is a much more important game. They'll prioritize the Denver game. They want this one. So, I mean, like I said, I don't really feel too strongly about this one. I have it right at the number, maybe a slight lean to the over. Live show at 4 p.m. Eastern time. As always, we'll go through every single game on the board. I got Moneyline Mac coming on. We're going to talk some March Madness. Starts the following day. So yeah, let's have a good one. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.